This is your daily reminder that if you are a filmmaker specializing in horror or a screenwriter, you can now submit your nightmares to our upcoming Horrific Hope Film Festival 2023 season. Click the links in the descriptions below and show us your nightmares. Hey, you are listening to the Victims and Villains podcast, a podcast extension of the nonprofit that creates content to educate and engage individuals like yourselves on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. And if you were born in the 90s, nothing is more pop culture than the movie we're talking about here tonight. We're talking about Toy Story. I'm your host, Captain Nostalgia, and we're getting ready for Buzz Lightyear or for Lightyear. You know, Chris Evans rebooting the character to see if he holds up. Well, no. I am joined by the host of the Manly Movies podcast, Mr. JB Huffman. What's up, my friend?
What's going on, man? I'm happy to be here, especially to talk
Got
about one of my favorite movies.
I am not gonna lie, man. I had forgotten that Toy Story they were doing a spinoff to this, and I haven't seen any marketing for this movie at all, outside of like the posters that are in theaters. But like, I'm excited and intrigued by the idea of a Lightyear movie that is actually like a space adventure, like taking the concept of what we got in the year 2000 with Buzz Lightyear of Star Command and kind of bringing it in like a more serious tone.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to it. My wife and I have talked about it. We hardly ever go to the movies together. I go separately, and every once in a while she'll go. But we have two kids at home, so we hardly ever get to sneak away and go to a movie. I think the last movie we saw was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, almost 3 years ago. But we have talked about how this might be one that we would actually go to because it's our childhood, man. Like we grew up on this movie on Toy Story, and so to see what this is going to become, I don't have extremely high hopes for it. I mean, Chris Evans could never hold a candle to Tim Allen in my mind. Sorry, it can't. There's a lot of childhood nostalgia in that too, not just Toy Story, but Home Improvement as well. So
yeah, well, we'll be talking about Lightyear in just a couple of weeks with a special surprise guest. So make sure that you guys are hitting the subscribe button if you guys like our conversation on Toy Story. That way, when the episode goes live, you guys don't miss it. But before we jump into talking about Toy Story and nostalgia, mental health, you just launched your podcast, Manly Movies. Give us an elevator pitch for what this show is.
Well, it's a movie for men about movies that men love, and it's not just your typical Rocky Rambo type stuff. I mean, we talked about. I just recorded an episode a couple weeks ago about time. So like it can be anything that's going to speak to a man from any kind of level, as a father, as a husband, or just as it is all men in general, because we all need help. And so it's getting in touch with our manliness and the lessons that movies can bring, lessons that movies can teach us. They can teach us a lot about life, and that's what we want to dive into. So that's what it is in a nutshell. It's just me, and I'll get one guest on, and he picks the movie. It's one of his favorites that he, has always been drawn to, that he's close to. And we just kind of sit and talk about it tavern style, and about our favorite, when we first watched it, and, how we can, the different lessons that we can take from that film, the manly moments as we call them. So.
Yeah, so like when you were telling me about the show has a lot of appeal, like a lot of crossovers with our themes of mental health, and men in particular. When it comes to mental health, it seems like it's a real struggle for them to kind of be open and kind of articulate what they're feeling. And for the listeners that may or may not know, the highest group at risk for suicide is actually men between the ages of 55 and 65.
Hmm.
And so like that is just, generations of us telling men to buck up, brush it off, bottle it up, keep it in. And I like the idea that, you're taking something as like, all right, this is a movie, but how's it speaking to me on an intellectual level? How's it speaking to me on an emotional level, or personal level, physical level, like even a spiritual level? And what does this mean for me as a man and as a viewer watching this, and how can I bring this and apply this into my own life?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, our very first episode, I had a guy on there, and he just started opening up to me about, his childhood and his relationship with his dad, how his dad was an alcoholic. And so it was just like a really heartfelt discussion. And you just don't get that with other men every day, because most men, especially when dealing with other men, we're going to be closed off. But to allow yourself to open up like that and just be real with each other, that's what it's all about, man. And
Absolutely.
that's what I wanted to do with this. This is for growth and discipleship. So
Yeah, I have a couple of friends that actually just started a podcast a couple weeks ago, and talking about in the process of like doing the podcast. It's like many people don't ever consider that when you do a podcast, it's like almost kind of like therapeutic, and like things just kind of happen when you get behind a microphone because you get comfortable and the microphone kind of tends to disappear. So I've shared a lot of things over the years of doing this podcast, and we've had guests, and we've had fellow staff members that have also kind of bared their soul on this. And it's just the magic of the microphone. Like you get those kind of really candid conversations that you wouldn't get it typically, like going to grab coffee, or at least I wouldn't say with men. Like I feel like men are a little bit more closed off when it comes to specifically their mental health.
for sure. Yep, definitely.
All right. Well, my biggest question that I always like to ask guests is, of course, we're here to talk mostly about Toy Story, but where can people find you online? Where can people find the podcast?
The podcast is called Manly Movies. You can search that out on, Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, we're probably on there. Or you can go to anchor.fm/manly movies. That's kind of our hub, and that'll take you to whatever platform you want to look it up at. I'm also on Twitter at Manly Movies One, and I also have a Facebook page, facebook.com/manly movies. I'm on Instagram too, same thing, at Manly Movies. I think the only one that has a one is the Twitter, but I'm JB Huffman. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm not extremely active on Twitter, but I am under my pseudonym, Manly Movies. So yeah, I'm very active on under that name. So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how like as a podcaster, I have kind of like let all of my personal social media die, but like I'm still relevant when it comes to victims. Like that's my platform to do everything. So if like I meet someone at a convention, they're like, "Hey, let's exchange Twitter or Instagram." They're like, "All right," I'm like, "Where can I find you?" I'm like, "At Victims and Villains." Like that's all it is, man. Like just send me there, and I'll answer all of your everything. So I just I'm only active on Letterbox. That's it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I'm on Letterbox constantly. So yeah, I get that.
Well, so we talked a little bit about this, kind of sharing in preparation for this episode. But you're a father of two. I'm a father of two cats. You're a father of two
Nice.
human beings. So this movie, you said that like it kind of hit differently, but I'm kind of curious, like, what is this? What does this movie mean to you as a cinephile, as a viewer? Kind of like from like a nostalgic sense. Like, can you kind of describe your journey, relationship with Toy Story?
Yeah, and I'll start from the beginning because it came out. I was 10 years old when it came out in '95, and my brothers were 6 and 3 at the time. So back then that was a way for the whole family together and watch this movie. I think I saw it in theaters with both of my brothers and my parents. And I just remember it being just a part of my childhood. I mean, and it didn't really speak to me on a emotional molecular level or whatever back then because 10 years old. But as I got older and I started realizing a lot of the inside jokes in that movie that parents can understand, like it's so ridiculously um profound. And like it's a lot of the jokes in there you will not understand unless you're an adult, from things like when Mr. Potato Head takes his mouth off and puts it on his rear end, mi- mimicking that Slinky is kissing Woody's butt. It's like just little things like that you notice when you're in your 30s. You're like, oh my gosh. Like, so, but I mean, on an intellectual level, it grows on me. But on an emotional level, from that opening scene, it hits me with Andy is playing with Woody. And first of all, just seeing Andy with Woody and the way he's like playing with him, like he's real, like he's a child, like I am with my kids. And so it also speaks to me because there's an innocence in that, and a child, the childlike faith and emotions. But then also, the opening scene is very emotional to me because I've watched this movie probably 100 times with my kids. And what scene do I watch the most with them? The opening scene, because, you know, 9 times out of 10, we don't watch the whole thing. We might watch the first 5 minutes, the first 20 minutes, the first 30 minutes, but we always watch the opening scene. So whenever I watch that, I'm thinking about my kids being in my lap as I'm watching the movie, and just kind of it's like a warm blanket. Um, but there's lots of things about the movie that just kind of really hit me. From Buzz when he finally realizes that he's a toy, it just kind of breaks my heart, man. Like, just to see that. And so we can talk about more of these as we move on, because there's a lot of it that really speaks to me. So
Yeah, this movie is for as much as I like Pixar movies like wreck me now, like this like tendency to like watch a modern Pixar movie like once, maybe twice, and like I can just not watch it again for like a decade. And Toy Story is one of those movies that this is the first Pixar movie that ever came, and it's the one that to me, like you were saying, like this is a movie that was like a staple in my household. Like I watched this movie all the time. And I like one of my like distinct memories is I'd gotten like good grades on like report card. My grandmother, as like a surprise, it surprised me with Toy Story, a copy of Toy Story 2 on VHS. And like that memory is like one of the most vivid memories that I have in my mind. Like because it was always like Toy Story was always a mainstay. Like I still to this day, I don't know where he is at right now, but I still have my Buzz Lightyear. Um, and I absolutely love that thing. Like it's one of the very few toys like I actually kept a hold of that I wouldn't let go of. And I, again, it was constantly in my. But as an adult, like rewatching them and like going to see Toy Story 3 in theaters, like it was the first time in like a long time that like as an adult, like in the theater, like that I'd like cried and like just got wrecked both times I saw it. And
mhm.
Toy Story is like a very special thing in my life because of that. And like, you know, I mentioned Buzz Lightyear Star Command. It was like the cartoon that like if you grew up on in the era of Toy Story, like you know what I'm talking about. But it was a very short-lived television, a 2D animated show that kind of explored Buzz Lightyear exploring the galaxy and kind of Star Command, and it was a great addition to the mythology. Um, but yeah, this movie was just such a mainstay in my house, and like even now, like as an adult, like it's probably one of the very few Disney movies that I still watch at least once, if not every other year.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that you're more of a Buzz guy than a Woody guy.
I am. I love me some Buzz, man. I'm just gonna put it out there. I love me some Buzz.
Yeah, my kids are more Buzz, and my wife and I are more Woody. But I mean, as I get older, I can kind of see both of them and appreciate both of the characters. You know, the Buzz's childlike faith and what he thinks he is and wants to be. You know, you kind of that's kind of something that you long for. You know, but then Woody is this realist kind of guy. You know that. And he's the kind of guy that I actually am. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would say like personality wise, like I'm definitely like a bit of both. So
Yeah.
like I have that lightheartedness that if you've met me at a con or you've listened to this podcast for any number of times, like just a I'm a lighthearted guy. Like, I like to laugh. I like to make others people laugh. One of my like my top probably my favorite thing in the entire world is to make my wife laugh. And so like that's a constant that I'm like always trying to do. And then like if I have to get like into like business mode when either at work or when I'm at when we're doing like more like the business side of victims and villains, like it's always like I'm Buzz, like taking on that like just realist and kind of like showing people what the situation is for what it is. And sometimes it's a good thing, and sometimes I come across being a little bit of a butthole. But you know what? uh it is what it is, man. Like this movie has influenced me in more ways than I guess I realized.
It's always good when you can realize that how much impact a movie has on you without you even knowing. So
Yeah, it's crazy too because both of these characters are vastly different that in the beginning of the movie to where you have, like I said, like Woody is really this guy that is just very focused and fixated on kind of keeping everything together for everyone. Like he's concerned about uh almost I would say like the entire the entire like mental health of like all the community of Andy's toys. But he's also at the same time like he's very worried about Andy. Like he's very jealous over Andy, and that love is very passionate to say the least.
uh the mental health word to describe Woody would be codependent.
A little bit.
just just a little touch of codependence there, man. Like he has to be needed by the other toys, by Andy, by Bo, by Buzz. Like he has to be the guy that everyone depends on, and he thrives in that, and that's what he wants to be. And you, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be the buck stopper, wanting to have everything on your shoulders. But it's like when he loses that and it wrecks him. I mean, and you see it in all throughout the whole series. And you see it harder in Toy Story 4. So like it's throughout the entire time, that is him. He's codependent. He has to be needed, and that's what gives him worth in life. So, whew, man, lot going on there with Woody.
Yeah, that's the downside too of codependency. Like you said, like if you can have a healthy codependency, like it's not necessarily a bad thing. I would say that like codependency is always somehow for someone in that party, whether it's person A or person B, there's always a downfall of that. And one of my favorite scenes in this entire movie is the scene. It's kind of like the montage after like the room is been changing from like Western to space stuff. And you get that great Randy Newman song, Strange Things Are Happening. And you just, from that, you get this Woody kind of is in the toy box, and he comes out, and he's kind of just in awe that like this room is just kind of turned up, and you get the great shark scene. He's like, I'm Woody. Sorry, I had to throw that impression in there because it's my one of my favorite scenes in this entire movie. But you kind of get this realization that like here you have this hero of this movie that is now kind of broken, and you're getting to see the downfall side of codependency, because I would say that codependency always ends in heartbreak for one party or the other.
Yeah, and you mentioned one of your favorite scenes. I got to drop mine out there too, because anytime, I'm a cinephile, I'll straight up admit that. So anytime somebody on Facebook or something says that they don't like a certain movie, or like say they don't like a genre, like something that like say like musicals or documentaries or whatever, my favorite gift to drop on people is the one of Mr. Potato Head. You uncultured swine. Which is a joke that I didn't understand till I was older what Picasso meant. So like that's good stuff, man.
Yeah, I mean, also like kind of coming back to the to the idea of Buzz, his kind of journey throughout the entirety of the movie is, here you have this, he's kind of like the quarterback, kind of shows up, steals the girl away, and kind of like steals everyone's attention. And obviously you have some jealousy between him and Woody. And what ultimately ends up happening with his journey throughout is kind of this sad realization for him, where he realizes that he is just a toy, that like he has like no real purpose in life. Like he's kind of, everything that I've been living towards has been a lie up till now.
Yeah, that's good, man, because you see Buzz, and he comes in, he thinks that he is something different than what he actually was. And when he's describing himself, he's basically reciting verbatim what's on the back of his box, sworn enemy of the Galactic Alliance or whatever. And so he just has this mental state of who he thinks he is. He thinks he's an actual space ranger. And, in this weird, strange world where people are telling him that he's a toy and that he can't fly, and that there's these giant people walking around, and he lives on a bed. So it's a different world for him. So yeah, I get that for sure.
Yeah, and like Buzz presents such a compelling argument to the importance of understanding both purpose and identity. And we talked about identity so much on this podcast, and kind of how it correlates to mental health, and specifically identity. I think that it's really hard to understand that you are not the thing you do.
Yep.
Like it's so easy to be like, when someone asks you to tell me a little bit about yourself. Oh, well, I am such and such. Like I find that so often in upper management where I work, where if I'm interviewing someone, my icebreaker question is, tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, I want to know about you as an individual. I want to know what your hobbies are. I want to know what makes you tick. I don't really care about your resume, because that's going to come later in the interview. But it's so many of us are so quick to throw out our jobs and our careers as identities, and we use those words interchangeably, and that's honestly really toxic for your mental health.
Yeah, for sure it is, and that's something that I've tried to stress with people all the time, that you're not what you do is not who you are. Who you are, I mean, really kind of depends on what your your religious background is, or whatnot, and then what your hobbies are, just what makes you tick personally. I don't care about what you do from 9 to 5 every day, like, but what is it about you that you want to, like, I was watching a movie recently. And I don't know why I just thought of this, but Walk the Line, when yeah, exactly, one of my all-time favorites. So Joaquin Phoenix, yeah, Johnny Cash is playing a gospel song, but he's just kind of doing it because that's what he grew up. He grew up playing gospel, and so because that's what he knows, that's what he understands how to play, and that's what he does with these guys. And so he's playing that in a to try to get a record deal. And the guy says, "Okay, I can't record that." And he takes it personally. He says, "You think I don't believe in God?" And he said, "No, I'm asking you, if you were standing there, you just got hit by a Mack truck and you're about to die, and you had one song to play. You're telling me that you would play that song? What song would you play? What song would you want to give everyone to let them know who you are?" And he plays Folsom Prison Blues. So I don't know where I was going with that, but that's just what it made me think of. That was, there's always something about every one of us that says who we are, what we're about, and it doesn't come from just what we do for a living, or what our role is. Even being a dad, yeah, everybody can say that. Everybody who's a dad can say that, but let's just get down right to what makes you tick. So.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us. Yeah, I love that Johnny Cash analogy, by the way, because it's like you're giving that answer of like, this is what people expect of me, versus someone that's actually saying, no, I actually want to know your inside soul. Like, I want to see you and be your most intimate. We this past when we're recording this is the night that I got out of the new David Cronenberg movie, and there's a line one of the characters says that we talked about it in our spoiler free review, but it says the desire to be open is the start of something beautiful. And that line is so compelling to me and so haunting, because I think a part of being vulnerable enough to share who you are, and as far as identity is, I mean, it's an intimate act. Like, I can say that, like, I, as my identity, I would say that I am a Christian, I'm a husband, I'm a cinephile. Like, those are the three things that I would say, like, describe me, like, who I am as an identity person right away. But the fact of, like, being more vulnerable and daring to kind of be more open and honest, I can truthfully say that, like, being a podcaster and doing stuff like this has really allowed me to yield a lot of fruit that have been meaningful relationships, truly awesome feedback, and just to constantly be humbled. Because when we started this podcast, like, I had no intentions of growing it to be a nonprofit. I had no intentions of growing to be multi-platformed, whether it's YouTube and Twitch, or the podcast, and now we're doing 4 different shows. And so it's like we never intended for any of that stuff to happen. It just, again, it's being vulnerable and kind of sharing who you are with the world, and allowing the world to see you for who you are.
Hmm.
And that's the act of really seeing your identity and really letting your identity show. Is It's this very intimate act of vulnerability.
Nice. Yeah, I feel you there. Podcasting does it does tend to help us to, I don't know, get our whole selves out there, and seeing what that can become, and the relationships that you build through that. So yeah, I feel you there. I just started this manly movie podcast, but I've been podcasting for 4 years. So some of my closest friends are people that I've met through I do an SEC sports podcast too. So those,
Nice.
those, yeah, those are the guys that I talk to more often than anything, because we've been doing a podcast together for 4 years, and we still do. Just, it's kind of out of season right now, but yeah, it's podcasting is a vehicle for our finding out who our true self is, I think. So
Yeah, and I mean, it's, again, you kind of eventually end up, like, disappearing with the mic, but there's this act of, once that microphone comes down, you're having these conversations, and you're building these relationships. And I'll be honest, I mean, sometimes we get guests in here that, like, we will never talk to ever again. And then we get
mm,
guests in here that we've been friends with, that, I've done their show. People from our staff have done other shows because of the relationships that have been crafted here. And that is very meaningful to me, because one of our core values at Victims is to always be community minded, and
yep,
because a healthy and a safe community is going to do wonders for your mental health.
absolutely, man. I feel you.
I feel like for Toy Story, when you're talking about this movie, you have the anchors of Woody and Buzz, and that is kind of where you go to. But this movie in particular, I mean, is obviously given us so many memorable characters. Like, who could forget Scud? What a dog!
Looks good.
I think in terms of like this movie, in particular, one of the things that we both kind of have uh, garnered a finer appreciation for other aspects of this movie as an adult. And I feel like, as a cinephile now, like, the reason that I love this movie so much is because you think about how groundbreaking it was.
Yeah,
Like, nobody was doing this type of animation in 1997, and or sorry 1995, and this not only spawned a 3 more movies, but you basically kickstarted an entire studio that Disney would have later buy. But also, it gave us other competitors like Ants and Shrek. And so now you have, like, now this is like the dominant form of animation, but it all started with this movie.
Right. And the model of, you know, really good animation and something that appeals to kids and parents, people of all ages, that they can get different things out of it. That's the new norm for animation today. And it started with Pixar. And yeah, and you mentioned, different characters in the movie besides Woody. And I'm gonna come back to Woody in a minute, but one thing that I didn't realize how much I um, related to it, but that line of Mr. Potato Head, whenever they're opening presents and he's like crossing his fingers, he's saying, Mrs. Potato Head, Mrs. Potato Head, Mrs. Potato Head. And he's like, what? A man can dream, can I? So, like, it's funny and it's played off for laughs, but it speaks to the desire in our hearts for companionship and to have someone, with us at all times, and someone who we can grow old with and share our deepest and darkest secrets, and share the good times and the bad with. And that's something that is ingrained in all of us.
Absolutely. I would bring up two people specifically for this, where like, for one, like my wife has just been like an absolute anchor, and that line in particular, Mrs. Potato Head, my mom quotes that line all the
Mine
time.
too. Mine too.
It's there's no context for it. My mom just always quotes it at least once a year during a family gathering. And it is absolutely like crazy, because I went from, you know, just kind of sharing a little bit of my story, like uh I talk about it sometimes every once in a while, but like, Jesus really got a hold of my heart, man. And like, I dated a bunch in high school, and just like, I've written poetry about how like women were like tissues, like,
Mm.
you were just insatiable. And I lost a friend to suicide, and that kind of shaped reshaped my entire world. And eventually I ended up kind of just talking to the woman that is now my wife and my best friend. And we've had good times, we've had bad times, but it has taught me so much as a human being, to be patient, to be respectful, to listen. Not saying that I didn't have any of those things before meeting my wife, but my wife has really uh, garnered a lot of that stuff in my life. And then on the flip side, I would say that like, I also have my friend Brandon that I talk to every day, and lives in Alabama. And for us, like, I mean, my day doesn't feel complete unless I've talked to him. And like, we have just gone through so many things over the last 10 years. And uh you know I'm he's always venting to me, I'm always venting to him. And like, but we at the end of the day, like, all of this stuff that we've been through has made us stronger. And I know that without a doubt, like, if I needed anyone in my corner to truly talk about anything, uh he's the guy. And I mean, that those those anchors for community, and those desires within our heart to be around someone and with someone, I mean, they are incredibly important for our functions as human beings.
Absolutely. And I'll say, growing up, it was, you mentioned that your mom quotes that Mrs. Potato Head line. And growing up, my mom and I were always really close. Like, I would come home from ball games and me and her would sit up and talk until like 2 in the morning. And so like she was my best friend all throughout my life. And then in high school, not high school, in college, she got pneumonia and sepsis, and she had to be put into a coma, and she was out for, I think, close to 2 months. And man, that wrecked me. Okay. And up until then, I'd had girlfriends. I'd even been engaged before, but that didn't work out. Um, And, I'd never really considered them to be, you know, a life companion or a helpmeet, as Genesis says about Eve for Adam. I haven't. They've never really been that rock for me because I always had my mom, right? But then I realized at 21 that my mom's not always going to be there, and like I found that out the hard way. I could have found it out in a much worse way. I know people at that age lose their parents. I get that. But I got a glimpse of that, of what that could be. And that's when I realized that, the relationship that I have with other females have to be intentional. And it has to lead to, something later on. And I guess I had to get older and understand that. And that's kind of where my wife and I started dating about a year after that, a little over a year after that is when we started dating. But to be honest, I wanted to date her for 3 years up until then because we met freshman year but we never started dating until senior year. But that was just I was waiting for my moment. And it finally happened. We were both single at the exact same time and we got together, and, I can truly say that she is my rock. She has been for 14 years since we first started dating. We got married in 2010. So the 12th anniversary in 2 days, actually, June the 5th. So
nice.
Yeah. So that's something I had to learn as I got older, that we absolutely need that helpmeet. And there's a reason that God took the rib from a man to create his wife, because they are part of us.
Yeah, and also like good things come to those who wait. Because like I said earlier, like in my experience, like I went through a lot of dating and trying to find that person, because like I don't know, I think that like I kind of had a Robbie from The Wedding Singer. I can't remember his last names. Robbie Hart. I had that like desire for me, because I was like, man, it was like marriage just seems like such a cool concept, and I don't know why I thought that at such a young age, because like most of my friends, like marriage wasn't even on the radar. It's not even like their vocabulary at that time. But like, to bring it back to Toy Story, like, and even in your case with you and your wife, like waiting so long, like at the end of the movie, he gets a Mrs. Potato Head, and you kind of get to see that relationship explored in the subsequent sequels. But it proves that like good things really do happen to those who wait. How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
Yeah. And those who keep hoping, keeping that hope alive, because he was obviously, he was hoping for her to come. But I wanted to touch on Woody again.
Sure.
Because there's a moment at the end where he finally has to stand up and be the hero, and he encourages Buzz, because Buzz is depressed, man. Like he is gone. Like, and he needed Woody. Going back to the codependency there. But Woody finally stands up. He has to be the hero and encourages Buzz of how important that he is to Andy, that he is a cool toy, right? And that, this whole time we felt like Woody felt like that he was growing apart from Andy and that he was losing that relationship that he has, but it was just more of him having to take a step back and look at everything and realize that Andy needs all of his toys, and and Buzz needs to understand how significant that he is to Andy's growth and his development as a kid and as a young man as he gets older, that he needs that companion. Um, so Buzz needs to understand his worth as an individual, as Andy's toys, part of his life. And so Woody is, just kind of preaching to him, saying that you're a cool toy. He looks up to you. He's got your name on your foot, like you are a part of him. And sometimes we can take a lesson from that, because sometimes we don't we think that we don't matter in the big scheme of things. And yes, I mean, I guess in the big scheme of the whole world, everything that's going on, one could say that. But to a select few, to the Andys of the world, we are a huge part of their world, a huge part of their life and growth and development. And I look at my kids, I look at my wife, my parents, my brothers, sisters, those that are close and around me, and my church members, people in my band, like the ones that actually depend on me. I'm a huge part of their lives, and you have to look at yourself like that and find your worth in your situation. And I always go back to my all-time favorite movie, It's a Wonderful Life, where George Bailey realizes, what the world will be like without him. And he sees that perspective. And that's what Woody is trying to convey to Buzz. And that without you, you know, this one person who's depending on you might grow up to be something that he shouldn't be. Like, he needs you, and you need to be that toy for him. So it was just, it was a cool moment of motivation and mentorship, basically, as the old toy, talking to the new guy. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That was just cool to me, and it's not something that I really put together until I got older. And this last time I watched it, and that probably the first time I watched it from start to finish without being interrupted by kids in a long time. So
I will also say, like, going off of that, like, it's, I feel like that's such a profound thing to say in this day and age, where you feel like there are so many people that are trying to get, like, TikTok, Snapchat, uh, YouTube, Facebook. They're trying to go viral, and this desire to really be seen, really be heard, has never been so prevalent. And one of the things that has always kind of kept me going as a podcaster, and as someone that, we design content specifically to deconstruct the stigma around mental health, is like, if at the end of the day, like, one person is reaffirmed in their value, then it's all worth it.
yeah,
And for some, and I'll be honest, I'll be vulnerable. Like, there are some days where, like, I get behind the microphone and I'm like, man, like, I just don't feel qualified to do this today, or I don't feel like what I have to say is enough.
yeah,
Or, if I'm truly saying enough, then why am I not seeing or experiencing a more abundant fruit coming from all of this? And there's a lot of that depression that comes in and weighs in, and uh, you know, but at the end of the day, like you were saying, like, I might not, in the grand scheme of things, like no one might ever know my, my full journey. But if my wife knows it, if I have if friends, like my like close friends, like they know it, and like the people I podcast with and write with, and bounce ideas off with, and our film festival crew, like all of those people, like at the end of the day, like that stuff matters. And that's really what is a brilliant driving point, is to know that like your value isn't necessarily, again, going back to what wrapped up in what you do, but your value is wrapped up in uh who you're around, and
Hmm.
kind of who you matter to.
Yeah. What's that old saying goes? Those who matter don't care, and those who care don't matter, or
Yeah,
uh,
sure.
something like
I've never
that.
heard that saying.
It's like, I, I'm probably butchering the saying, but you get the sense. But what's funny about that is, Woody, you kind of see his arc in this movie. He comes right back to the exact words that he said in the very beginning. But in the beginning, he was preaching to a bunch of toys. But then later on, he had to learn that lesson himself. The thing that he said in the beginning was, whenever they were getting all these new toys, Andy's birthday was coming up and everybody was worried. He was telling all these other toys, he said, it doesn't matter how much we're played with. What matters is that we're there for Andy when he needs us. And
Yeah.
at that point, he was preaching that, but he wasn't actually living that and believing it, because he was Andy's favorite toy, and it didn't matter to him because he was still going to be, number one. But at the end, it was basically he was preaching to himself, in that he was being there for Andy when he needs him, and what Andy needs from him at this moment is to pass the torch and help Buzz understand his worth. So that's, man, I am who you say I am.
Yeah,
I have to
absolutely,
I have
man.
to preach that to myself all the time.
Yeah, and it's like it's one of those things too. Is like you have to constantly, like, it's self-care is so important. So like you have to take time to like decompress. Like I just talked about it in one of our YouTube videos about like purposely setting time aside to be like, all right, like all my work is done for the day. Like I need to decompress, and I need to take value in my own self-worth and my own self-love, and need to refuel myself essentially, and being intentional about that. And so like I start and end my day that way. Um and I'm very intentional, and like I feel like that the reason that like I'm able to do as much as I am doing with everything that we've got coming out, is because of that, is being intentional about, um yeah, is being intentional about it.
Yep, for sure. You've got to. It's really easy to get caught up in the monotony of every day, and every day seems like the same, and you can just kind of be on autopilot. But you know where you find the things that really matter, and to get the most out of every day, you have to be intentional with everything that you do. When you're spending time with your wife, you have to be intentional on, don't just say, how was your day? Like, but really open up to them, and find out more about, well, how did that make you feel? You know what I mean? Like, not just, oh, it was okay. It was fine. Well, what happened? Like, be a little bit more intentional with that. And then, those with kids, the time that you spend together, you can sit around and watch movies, and we do, and that's fine. But also, we will have conversations with each other, and I will get down on my hands and knees and play with them on the floor, because first of all, I need the exercise. And secondly, because I need to be intentional on how I play with them. I need to get down on their level and show how much I care. So it's little things like that, that just going the extra step, know, the the extra mile, as Jesus said. So that's like you said, being intentional about our daily lives is what matters the most. So
Absolutely. And yeah, I think it's a good ending place to do there. So one more time, hit us with those socials and where people can find you.
yeah, on Twitter, I'm at Manly Movies One, and on Facebook and Instagram, it's just at Manly Movies or Facebook.com/Manly Movies. And I'm on both of them, and I'm also on Letterboxd, and that is under. I can't remember what my Letterboxd tag is. You can edit this out later. There it is. Okay. On Letterboxd, I'm on there under JB Huffman. That's Juliet Bravo Huffman, Huffman. But yeah, I'm also on Facebook. I'm in the Feel and Film Facebook group. If anybody who's a part of that, you can find me there talking about movies. And if you like SEC sports, I do a SEC sports podcast called SEC Tavern Talk, and that's a fun time. But my podcast, my movie podcast is Mainly Movies. You can find either one of those podcasts on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Amazon, whatever. I'm out there.
All right. Well, you guys can follow me also on Letterboxd at Captain Nostalgia. So we also do a Nicolas Cage podcast, and every time I end that show was a running gag for a while that my co-host had never heard of Letterboxd, and so he's convinced that it's made up social media. But I'm like, nope, it's very real. I promise you, it's very real. You guys can follow our parent company at Victims and Villains. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, wherever you guys get your podcast from, Patreon. And most importantly, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net to get links to all of that, more podcasts like this, movie reviews, and most importantly, our mental health resource library. Make sure that you guys click the links in the descriptions below. Check that out and show us your nightmares. Our submissions for 2023's Horrific Hope Film Festival are now open. Thank you guys for joining, and we'll talk to you guys soon.